Welcome to Beyond the Frontline podcast, where your host, U.S. Air Force veteran Donna Hoffmeyer, will help you transition from the front line to the home front. Listen every other Wednesday as we'll bring great conversations, resources, tips, and feel-good stories that will resonate and relate. Now, here's your host, Donna Hoffmeyer.
Hey everyone, it's Donna, and it is a soon-to-be very cold day. We're walking into an ice storm, so I know I'm kind of time-stamping us, but we do record these ahead of time, and I like so you guys know what's going on in my world. And right now, the stores are all empty down here in Texas because they're all buying the wood and the bread and the peanut butter and everything else in preparations for 3 days of cold weather. That's probably our winter, hopefully. All right, so this week, what we're going to be talking about, we're going international, and I am so excited. So you guys must be doing your job sharing, because now I'm starting to get requests from down under, and I got a request from Australia. And I thought what was even better about it was who we're interviewing. What we want to talk about today, this is what I want to get into, is we are in a very inflamed state of the world right now for lots and lots of reasons, which are not relevant to this podcast at all, but just that the world right now is just very inflamed and it's stressful. And even if it's not in your world directly, that energy is just really exhausting everybody. And we are seeing it in many different ways. I think I notice people are just kind of like more within themselves. I don't see them really getting out as much. I run a nonprofit, we do events, we see less people signing up for things. I don't know if that's related or not, but I just do feel like this world is very inflamed right now, which makes this podcast all the better because I am going to be talking to Tim Thomas. And Tim is an Australian Special Forces Commando, or an X1, but I think it's kind of like Marine. Once a Special Forces, always Special Forces kind of thing. And he did combat in Afghanistan. And what he did, like many of us, is that he got wore out and he crashed and he burned. And he was dealing with PTSD, chronic exhaustion, a near-death ambush. And then he actually found something that we've talked about in the past here, breath. That simple, right? But that impactful. And once he started using breath work and rest, he ended up finding is it nonprofit? Is it considered a nonprofit?
Yeah, we call them ESOs in Australia,
Okay.
external service organizations, but non-profit is
Is an equivalent to that.
Potato.
Yeah, but there we go. So he founded Breathworks in bed, and it's a global app that helps people switch off, sleep deeply, and wake human again. And he's spent over a decade supporting veterans. He's raised over $1 million for mental health research, and he's guided people back to connection to themselves, their breath, and each other. Welcome, Tim.
Great to be here, Donna.
I'm super excited. Actually, I giggle because when you reached out to me, because I always do a pre-meet, and we had to reschedule one time, and because you said, "Hey, we're going shark diving," and I'm like, "Say what?" You're like, "I have to reschedule, taking people shark diving," and I'm like, "Okay, is that part of Breathworks?" I was really confused.
Yeah, so there are places in Australia you can go diving with sharks. You're in a cage, but in that area, that's kind of where I grew up. So I took them there to dive in the cage, but then I took them further west, and we swam in the same water, but without a cage, just to sort of. I noticed
And
like
sharks?
before. Well, you don't know. I mean, it's just, it's
Open space.
It's just the beach, I suppose, or we went out on a jetty. But I just noticed that I would go to these remote areas and get in the water there myself. I was a spear fisherman, and I grew up in that area, and I grew up terrified of sharks. Like I'd wake up screaming. So now as an adult, when I get in the water, and I take the right precautions and all that, but I just noticed that post-military, I was looking for a space that put me in the moment, because I noticed once I got out of the military, the hardest thing about civilian life was it was so freaking easy. Like the hardest thing I had to do that day was decide what I had for lunch, you know, and the environment wasn't demanding enough, right? So
Right.
I noticed that when I got in the water, this place where I was terrified, and I'd swim out some distance, my courage would fail itself. And I noticed that because you have to remember these are apex predators, great white sharks. They can see through you. So if you're fearful, they might think you're prey. But,
Uh,
you know, so if there's any kind of fear in you and if they appear suddenly and you're scared, then they might make a mistake and think you're prey.
right.
Um, so courage failed me, but what I noticed I had for me to be centered and in control in that moment was me giving up certain things. So
Uh,
giving up the desire to walk on land again, giving up the desire to see anyone I care about again, giving all these things up, give it up, give it up, give it up. And then all of a sudden I'm in that moment 100%. And you'd maybe call it a forced mindfulness, but I just felt like something inside of me switched back on like it did during service, you know?
so it's almost like letting go, being vulnerable, and being present
I notice when we're 100% present, there's not a thing we can't handle. Not a thing we can't handle. But
because you're
if
present.
I'm
Yeah.
yeah, but if I'm not present, even the small things become hard.
Gee. Well, let's go back. Like, we kind of like jumped right in the front end
Sorry,
of it,
sorry.
but no, no, no,
We
it's okay. It's my job to make it to to keep it in line. So we'll go backwards. So you made that comment, afraid of sharks and having dreams. Did an event happen that led you to have nightmares of sharks, or was it just something that because you lived in that area and you knew sharks were there as a kid, you felt unsafe?
where I grew up was Australia's capital for great whites. And if you've seen the movie Jaws, it was just like a small seaside village like that.
Oh,
And as a kid, I loved the ocean, but just got terrified of these things. And and the hard thing was you'd wake up screaming from these nightmares, and it wasn't like the boogeyman is not real. These things were real. And
yeah,
so it wasn't until they invented this device called the Shark Shield, which is an electrical device that creates an electronic field around you. And I tested the first prototypes, and I can honestly say they work. They just need to be turned on. Um, and that enabled me to get back in the water and not think it's,
have the fear.
suicide. And then I started realizing these sharks, they have rules. Just like if someone came into your house, Donna, and they started kicking over chairs, you're like, you're not supposed to be here, get out.
Right.
But if someone comes in, they conduct themselves appropriately, they move appropriately, and they look like they belong, then, you let them stay. And sharks are just the same, So that's that was sort of what me getting back in the water, and I've been doing it for a bit over 20 years now, has enabled me to do. And funnily enough, here's the thing. When I was working with veterans, one of my most successful recovery programs that I ran was a freediving program. Because here's the thing, all right? I hope this is not off topic, but I just want to say there's so many pills and drugs to level out your nervous system, but
Mm-hmm.
one of the fastest way to balance out your fight or flight and your rest and digest is putting your face in water, because between our eyebrows we have this little starfish shaped gland that once we're underwater it sets off this automatic superpower that slows your heart rate down, brings all your external circulation into your core, actually shuts off the stress in your brain. And all these veterans were saying, Tim, for the first time in years, all the noise stopped in my head. And it was simply activating this superpower that we all have. And this is the joy that I have in my job. Everyone's got a body, but we don't know how amazing it is. And
Yeah.
this simple gland between your eyebrows, once it's in water, um, it literally acts like a lobotomy to the stress in your head. It mechanically cuts it off, because once this deep ancient wiring overrides your thinking mind, because when you're in that survival state, it
Mm-hmm.
says, okay, what's important here? And it makes a decision. Is stress important for me to be alive? No, it's not. And it cuts it out.
That's
Isn't that amazing?
interesting. to have
Deep down,
that.
we
Yeah.
know that we don't need stress to survive.
I'm gonna have a pail of water beside me now and dunk my head in it every once in a while.
What,
Well,
what,
let's. So we were talking about this before. I have to tell the audience, like, I was on fire before we got on the podcast here because I said I do a lot in the nonprofit world and just kind of been having some struggles with certain areas. And so Tim and I just happened to be talking about it. And I said, you caught me fiery today because I just feel like we're not doing, all the things that we need to do. So anyways, getting back to the topic, I was saying to him, I said, you have to go through things in order to be able to have a good impact or the impact that you want, right? Like if you don't understand that person and you haven't been through certain things that are similar, it's really hard to give good care. You know what I mean? So anyway, so kind of going back to what Tim and I talking about, I said we need to understand your why, right? Like we want to understand what you've been through in order for everybody to understand why you connected with breath and the water, and now you have Breathworks and all the importance. So we started a little backwards to talking about like connecting, and you're telling people like, look, things like water can de-stress you, but what led you there? Because this wasn't like, oh, I think it'd be really cool to start breathing. It's not random. Like we go through shit. And the more we're passionate about that, I do believe there's a direct correlation, the more shit we've been through.
oh, you just said a mouthful, and it's so funny you should say that because I tell
Yeah,
my veteran buddies, you might not think you're special, but I bet you've been through some shit, and our job is not to stay in the shit, is to turn that shit into fertilizer,
there
you
you
know, and
exactly.
and it's actually there to help you grow and everyone else grow. And guess what? The shit that took you 10 years to get through, that's the amount of time you're going to be able to save everyone else. So think of that for a second. We owe it to ourselves not to sustain the shit, but to turn it into fertilizer, and
Yeah.
only you can get that ball rolling.
Yeah, and then plant it on, put it on other seeds and help them grow. So what's all the shit you were in? Where did you go? So you came in, so I think it's kind of interesting, you like had this great fear as a kid, and then you end up, through something decide I'm going to the military and oh hell, I'm going to be a, special forces commando. Like what was that process?
Well, before I was in the special forces, I was in the early days of mixed martial arts. So back then they didn't call it mixed martial arts; it was just no rules fighting. And in Australia, it was just sort of semi-legal in these rough biker bars, and back in the 90s you could smoke in bars, right? So you're walking out to fight in the ring coughing up half a lung from all this secondhand smoke from the crowd. um and I was training full time but not making any money from that. And then this ad comes on the TV, and I'd tried to get in the military when I was 18, but you know how they love mucking around your paperwork, losing it, finding it. I'm like, if this is what it's like on the outside, what's it going to be like on the inside? These guys are so disorganized, right? And then and 10 years later, when I'm 30, there's the first time in Australia's military history, they start this direct recruiting scheme, drawing wanting to go into the special forces, drawing directly from the civilian population. That had never happened before. And the maximum cutoff age was 30, and I was 30 at the time. And everyone said, "Oh, you're too old, you're too old." And I'm like, "Well, now I'm dyslexic. I see things in patterns, and what I saw was this was the first time I'd actually aged. I'd never been 30 before, and everyone else was telling me, "Oh, this is what you can do and can't do at 30." And I'm like, shouldn't it be us that decides what we do at this particular age? Because this is the first time you've been at that age, your age, Donna, you know,
Right.
um, and first time. And so
Exactly.
I thought, well, let it be me deciding what I can and can't do. And I think 5 to 10,000 people applied. It was a very popular idea. 70 people got accepted. I got in the 70. Um, and the military was very resistant to this idea. We were considered civilian queue jumpers, so two of the most disliked things. Um, Because yeah, no one cuts in line on a military base, as you know.
And especially you're going in special forces and you're like, we're just going to go directly. So we call that direct admit, right? Like,
Yeah.
holy crap. Yeah. So not only cutting the line, so to speak, but you're at your max age and 30 in that world, it's older. I mean, the physical demands on the body are exceptional. So you end up going in though, you're like, hell, who tells me I can't? Let's go.
Oh, and you know what it's like because it's so immersive. It's not just the physical duress, it's all the personal stuff that you need to take care of. So my the first letter I got from my wife at the time, my then wife, and I call her my then wife, not my ex-wife, because I stand for a positive future. And I've just noticed if I say ex-wife, there's so much negative energy that comes to it. Because if you hear me referring to my then wife, that's what I mean. The first letter I got from my then wife was saying, "Hey, honey, I'm pregnant," and I'm like, "Great," but then I do the math, and I'm like, if I get through this, that's when I'll be on Special Forces selection. And this was hanging over my head as I'm going through this. And I got to the point of just before selection. And my wife was, huge belly at that stage.
Yeah.
And they said, Tim, this is Special Forces selection. You can see your kid being born or you can do selection. And that was a hell of a thing, Donna, because I had to give up my own idea and think, well, from the child, I have to see this from the child's perspective. What does that child need? Does it need me physically there at the birth, or does it need a dad with a job? Because as
Mm.
much as I was a hardworking dude, I was bringing in zero coin, you know, and I wanted to give, that child everything I could, and so, I spoke about it with my then wife, and she was very understanding. We got all the support. We flew in family members to support her, and I went and did selection, you know.
Ooh, that's I mean, my husband missed the birth of our son. And to this day, it still kind of crushes him that he wasn't there for the first. And I remember the army went through a phase where they were deploying people for, I think it was up to 18 months, and they were having them like come home like halfway. And I remember I was a labor and delivery nurse at the time, and I was talking to this lady's spouse, and she's telling me that, he came home. She got pregnant right when he was leaving, and then came home kind of midway, but wasn't gonna be able to stay for the delivery. He's like, when he sees her, she'll be 9 months old, and I'm like, whoo, that I mean. Yeah, exactly. Like, you can't see us, but yeah, we're hitting our hearts. Like that's a hard one. 9 months old. You miss. Those are some serious years right there. I mean, serious months that you miss, and that bonding and stuff. So I get it. That's an enormous decision. Um, the heart versus the pragmatic side. Oof, that's a tough one right there. So you end up joining. How many years did you do in the
6
military?
years full time.
6 years full time. Special forces, 6 years full time. Not not a
We were
personnelist.
busy, I'll say that.
Yeah, you were busy. So we're gonna kind of like go through. We kind of have the understanding of special forces is there. You're deployed. You're in the thick of everything. You're the go-to people. You're the first there. You're the first there, even when people don't even know you're the first there. They might find out later when they decide to declassify that you were the first there. So your austere conditions, very dangerous, and you do that consistently for 6 years. Did you go to the reserves or anything like that, or did
I
you?
did try that, Donna, but I think the word undiagnosed PTSD, things would just affect me without knowing it. So I'd go to the reserves and their training would be out playing football, right?
Oh,
They'd do a
yes.
tiny bit of drill, they'd play football. And I'm like, here I am getting paid to play football and my mates are in Afghanistan getting shot at. And,
Yeah.
but, and it wasn't just in that space. If I was sitting down having a coffee on the street, how can I be enjoying myself if my mates are out there? There was this
Like
really,
survivor's guilt, or like, and not, I mean, survivor because they're still alive, but yeah, there's a guilt there that,
and I also had a nervous system in a state of fatigue, wouldn't let me rest,
mm,
and when that happens, the mind looks for reason to keep justifying that you can't rest, and it's often scanning for threats that aren't even there. And it's so exhausting, and it's such, yeah.
You bring up a point though when you say that, like your mind is you're scanning, right? And so, and this has been said in different realms, and I just kind of want to hit this home to the audience is that you're not broken because you do that. You were trained to do that, right? You had to go into these environments and you needed that skill set because if you were not scanning, then you were not surviving. That's just end of story, right? Very simply stated. So when we come home and you're like what you just said, I couldn't shut it off. I couldn't shut it off because that is what has been trained. You have been trained. We don't bring people back and deprogram them. We just bring them back, right? They just come home and now you're left to figure out how to deprogram yourself. And curiosity question, because this, were you still married after the 6 years? I mean, you guys were
Oh,
still,
correct. Yeah, 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 yeah.
okay.
We
So,
we got divorced during COVID. Yeah.
okay. So what's interesting is, and I, taking care of a lot of service members and veterans, and when PTSD is being acknowledged, I used to ask the same question to almost all of them. I'll be like, so who noticed first, your wife or your kids? Tell me. It was never them. It was never them. It was always somebody else that brought the awareness, right? Because again, you are trained. This is you. What is wrong with me? I am doing what I do, right? Until somebody finally says, hey, I know you're doing what you do, but this is not conducive in this world. It doesn't work in this world. So, did that happen to you? Did you have a
Yeah, yeah. It
similar?
wasn't until and what we don't realize is we think we're doing everyone a favor by keeping the pain inside of us and not talking about it and trying to
Right.
stuff it down like a rubbish bin, trying to,
Yep.
compress it instead of emptying it. But that was greatly impacting the relationship with my then wife and the development of my children. And yeah, it wasn't until things really started falling apart where the ultimatum, look, you got to do something, otherwise we're out, you
Right.
know. And and it's a hard thing, not just to admit that there's something wrong with me, but also a hard pill to swallow that you're hurting the people you love. Everything I do is to protect them. How can I be hurting them? How can I be the one?
Right. Which is
That's such a,
confusing, right?
yeah.
It's very
Like I'm the one
and
that stops the threat. How can I be the threat?
well, and even like so I was helping a situation and the veteran their background was a sniper. And I was like, "Oh boy, I knew this was going to be really difficult and it didn't disappoint, let me assure you." But I had to explain to his fiance who had never dated a veteran and when she said his background, I kind of like lowered my eyes a little and she goes, what does that mean? I said, it doesn't mean anything. I said, it's just that his background, everything that he did in the military is everything he'd get in trouble for in the civilian world. Like he was, you're lauded for this. You're a sniper, you're this, like you're trained this way and you're protecting and you're doing all that. And if you came out and acted the same way and did the same stuff, you would be in trouble, right? Like, so I said it's very confusing out here. It's extremely confusing because he thinks he's doing this good by controlling the situation and making sure that you're safe and like this all those skill sets. I go, and he has not yet acknowledged that it not does not work out here. I go until they can get that, you're not doing anything wrong. I mean, it's impactful. It doesn't turn out well, but in their head, it doesn't seem wrong. I'm doing the things that in the military was just fine. So did any of that can you relate to any of that? Kind of like
Well,
that.
I want to just level up what you just said. There's things that they encourage you to do in the military that is discouraged in the civilian world. but
Right.
the things that get you ahead in the civilian world are actively discouraged in the military world. So,
Correct.
so it's like having to push to the surface all these things that were suppressed in the military, like self-expression, the ability to think, not think for yourself. But there was a whole bunch of things like okay, let me say it like this: your own individual expression of who you are. In the
Right.
military, you have to sort of pull yourself in. And the best analogy I could use for civilians listening to this is think of out front of your house, you've got a mailbox, and everyone's mailbox is unique, it's different. And if you grabbed everyone's mailbox, you could probably fit six in a room. Okay. But in the military, everyone has to fit into one place. So you have to pull in your own individual identity. So, when you go into the GPO box and you got those little square boxes where you check your mail.
Yeah.
So that's what the military does. It allows everybody to work together, and it's incredible. You can get things done
Sufficient.
in that
Yes.
space that's incredibly efficient. You can really make an impact on the world like that, but your own individual identity has to conform to people around you, and you get that honed in with your survival is at stake level relative to the amount you can suck your own individual footprint down to work in with everyone else. and
Yes.
and I guess, yeah, can you see the picture I'm kind of
No,
trying to paint there?
yeah, I kind of get what you're saying. Is like I think of it as like your uniform. When I would put my uniform on, it's like I'm zipping up me inside of it. That uniform hides my self-expression, my individuality. It's all hidden within that uniform, right? That's my armor. And I mean, I'll be honest, there I would go into certain scenarios like we used to fly into some of the Middle East countries, right? And uh, you would you couldn't wear your uniform. We would have to get into our civilian clothes, and they were very specific on when women could wear because we would go to the airport, pick up people, and then pull them out. Um, and so um, we would uh have to like we couldn't wear tank tops, we couldn't do this, we couldn't do that. And what it did is like we could wear certain things, couldn't wear our uniform, and then we had to work with the liaison. And I felt very disempowered because they were not nice in those airports and they did not look kindly to women. And uh, I would have to negotiate and I would have to tell them, no, you can't charge extra. It's 50. It's not 55 for that stamp. It's this, it's whatever. And they would just bow to it because the liaison told them they had to, but it wasn't because of me. It was because that was the rule, the agreements that we had made with that country or whatever it was. Anyways, I digress on that. The point being is that I was felt very disempowered. My uniform was my safety place. And so I would put that on and then when I came out of the military and then you're in the civilian world and you got to be who you are. And I'm like, who's that? She was all zipped up in there. My greatest stress of retiring was picking out clothes. I'm like, oh my God, I got to pick out clothes. There's no thinking. And I just grab my uniform, I just stick it on. We're good, right?
Yeah.
And we did. We look like everybody else. Our hair is the same. We all the way down to like, I don't know if people know this, but in the military, you can only wear certain color nail polish, and how long your nails can be. And I mean, it is very curated. We become very curated. So back to your post office description, you all got those cool post office, I mean, those mailboxes with the rooster on top, or it looks like a dog's butt, or it's a pickle, or whatever the heck it is. Um, and then the military is the ones that's in the post office, right? They're all mailboxes, but how they work is vastly different. We are much more efficient because there's 150 of us in the same space that you have 10 of you in. We're more efficient. We're more this and that. Like I get it. So then you come out and you're lost. And then you're in some of these career fields like you are, that you are lauded for certain things that in the civilian sector you you would not be lauded for those
Yeah.
things. You could even be in jail for some of those things, depending on
Mm.
what that is. So it's confusing. It's confusing. You come out in the civilian world, and like you said, you're like, there's no stress. But because of that, that's what the stress is, because there's nothing. So now it is stressful because you're like, all my skill set's not working out here.
Yeah. Yeah. And what I did was I just tried to handle it on my own.
Right. I was
Because
waiting
the
for
other
you. I'm
little,
like, come to it.
yeah,
I
well,
know it's
look, the other
coming.
thing that I associated in the military is you don't ask for help because help means you're weak. And if you're weak, you'll let the team down. And we'll die before we let the team down. So we think we're doing everyone a favor by not asking for help and not letting the team down. Um,
And I've
and
even said this to people, which I'm not proud of, but I have said to people, look, you have two choices. You can either handle your shit, like if they have personal stuff going on, whatever, or you can bring it in here. And if you bring it in here, the military has a great way of helping you out, quote unquote, helping you with your shit. And it may not be in a way that you're going to like. So what's your choice? So what did I just tell them? Don't, don't bring it in here. Leave that shit at home. Don't ask for help. I literally told people don't ask for help. Not a proud moment, but that's how we're trained in the military. And I come out now and you're like, what?
and just on that, I do know there's a time and a place to get
Yes.
creative, look inside. I think this country was made great by that. Harden the hell up, right? But if you don't understand, and this is where when I work with people, and I might just sort of speak to this as an image. Think of a pyramid, and I tell people performance is like a pyramid. Top of the pyramid, you're kicking ass, chewing bubble gum, whether you're in business or the military, you're getting stuff done, and that's very visible. But the bottom of the pyramid, and this is what no one talks about, and this is what they don't do particularly well in the military, is your rest, recovery, and healing art forms. And everyone loves the performance. Everyone's applauded for their performance, but nobody is talking about the rest, recovery, healing art forms, because the wider the base of the pyramid, the longer you can sustain the top of the pyramid. And what ends up happening is people just start feeding into the top of the pyramid, the scene, the work, the work that you've done, the goals that you're achieving, the goals that you're heading towards. And in my mind, because there was no talk of how to recover, how to sleep properly, how to rejuvenate yourself, crashes in my world was absolutely inevitable, and I I think I needed that crash, A, for me to see outside my own world and ask, oh, is there a better way of doing this? Because up until that point, I'm telling myself by my strength and by willpower, I can make this work. But when I completely crashed, then I had to ask the question. I was forced to ask the question, is there a better way?
So the crash, right? We always say, like, yeah, if you're not careful, you'll come out and crash and burn. To that, I say, I think everybody has to crash and burn to some extent, but not as a pile of ashes, but like a phoenix, right? Because to me, that I'll put quotes on the word crash, right? That crash kind of takes off that armor layer. It humbles you a little bit. It opens you up. It cracks you open. And then it takes off the indoctrination. And I'm just saying that I'm not saying that indoctrination has a bad term, because you and I both know if we are not indoctrinated into that, we are not going to perform like we're supposed to, especially your world, way more important than anything. So, like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, there's a lot of bad press about indoctrination or oh, what's the other word for that? Um, there's
Uh,
another word. It's the indoctrination, and there's another word for it. But basically, imagine this. Imagine 100 people working as one unit, like they seamlessly work together. And imagine, the best days people have is when they feel connected to their friends and they're just doing things together. They're of one mind. Okay. No friction between people. Like that is a good day. And in the military, you can experience that when you have people either side of you and they've got the same kind of smooth edges. So, and this is what, some people call indoctrination, other people call just have an amazing day with an incredible team. And
Symbiosis, maybe.
yeah, yeah,
Is
I
that a
think there's a better name for it, but
yeah.
this is where you know, us humans, I firmly believe that our sense of peace, power, connection, joy is relative to how connected we are to our fellow humans. And when we go through that military process of knocking off those rough edges,
Hmm.
looking inside of it, but looking towards your buddies, as you'd say, I'd say mates,
Yeah.
um, then all of a sudden it doesn't matter where you are. If you've got that connection, it's like there's nothing you can't do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't necessarily think indoctrination is like a evil word. I mean, the connection you create, that symbiotic connection that, there's no match for it. I get it. When you're having a good
Mm.
day and everybody's on point and it's all flowing and it's like you just all know. I think the indoctrinating part of it in the bigger sense, so like is that you have to go do this mission, that other people may or may not, like some people think we're crazy for doing some of this stuff, right? Um, but what we learn, we're indoctrinated saying we believe in the mission, we're going to do the mission, we're loyal to the mission and all that. Then what we learn within that is that connection, that like how to make that happen, right? So that
Yeah, yeah,
symbiotic connection is what makes the mission happen and whatnot. I think the indoctrinating part is just like we have to get you to believe in that mission, and you have to understand things like, there's no I in team, right? The weakest link is going to be your downfall. And so guess what? In our book, there's not going to be a weak link. What does that mean to us? We know who the weak link is, and we're going to make sure they're extra briefed, or we've got an extra set of eyes on them, or they're extra whatever. Like they're not going to fail us. Like we're not going to let you be the weak link. We know you are, but we're not going to let you. Right. So I think, like I said, we wouldn't do what we did. If I said to my mom, "Hey, mom, why don't you get on this, 1970s tin can that doesn't even have comfortable seats and breaks down sometimes more often than it stays together. And we're going to go fly into this country that's at war right now and go pick up some people." Pretty sure she would not take me up on that offer. And I'm just skipping out the door going, let's go, and thinking nothing of it. Obviously, there's indoctrination there, right? It is what it is. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's sometimes what makes amazing things happen, but within that we learn amazing things, right? We learn the symbiotic, we learn the connection, we learn efficiency. We
yeah.
learn how to make things work like amazing, right? And then we get out of the military. And then what?
Yeah,
What
yeah.
did that look like for you? You said some of it. You stepped out, and then it's like,
Well,
then what?
I've definitely got a story topical to this. Now, I do see we're top of the hour, and I've been drinking my hot beverage, and I've just gotten out of an ice bath, so I might need just a 2 minute break, and then we'll continue on. Is that okay?
That is totally fine.
All right, so if we just put a pin in it, we'll be back
Yep.
very soon.
Okay, we're back. It's all good. Little potty break because you're drinking your water.
Well, I'd actually just gotten out of an ice bath, so it's quite early in the morning where I am. And just to get myself ready and in the zone, I jumped in the ice bath for a period, and that's awesome. But it just makes the system open up, and yeah.
How long can you last in the ice bath?
Well, I've noticed that there was a time when I try and push for time, but you don't get the same sort of. There is a diminishing returns. Think of because it's what's called a hepatic stressor, so
Yeah.
a healthy stress. So ideally, when you mow the grass and it grows
Hmm.
back thicker,
Yeah.
but if you mow the grass down to the dirt, you're not doing it any favors. That's what it's
Yeah.
like with the ice bath. Everyone's got an ideal time, and there's actually men and women vary. So for women
Oh,
to get the same benefit, they don't need it as cold for as long. They tend
thank
to do better
goodness.
in the saunas with the heat shock proteins. But what happens with ice bath exposure is, like I mentioned when we started, that mammalian dive reflex that kicks in too, which has a an incredibly balancing effect.
How long do you
In
do it?
well,
Well,
usually
how long did you
between
do it this morning?
this morning, 2 minutes 34 seconds.
I could do that. That's what I'll
Yep.
do. All right. Well, let's get into this because we're gonna like you and I could talk forever. The last time we met, I was like, "Oh Lord!" So we looked at each other and we're like, "Whoo, we'd be in trouble." We probably
Now,
start our own podcast on all kinds
and
of
and
things.
and you know what? I would love to do a part two. I have another 20 minutes
Good.
before my yeah. So
We're gonna
I'll
rock
give you
this
as
out
best
for
I can
you.
in the next 20 minutes.
We can do this very easily. So when you realize, everything was going on, so the world falls apart,
Yep.
and this is, I mean, I hate to say, but it's like almost a playbook, right? Like, I mean, everybody's situation is unique, but the structure is very similar, right? So you come out, you have a lot of trauma, obviously, what you were doing, and sure enough, wife, comes up like you changed or we're done. Obviously, can't do that on a dime, right? And so that ends, and now you're like, what the hell, right? So now what? You get it. Where are you at?
Yeah, and this is the thing. I didn't know what to do, and then the mainstream system says, "Oh, you've got to see a psychologist or a psychiatrist." I can't remember, but it was difficult for me because I'm like, "Who is this guy? I don't trust them." But what do I know? Apparently, I'm crazy right now, and so I was very stressed going to my first appointment, and I'd told him all the things that I saw in service, all the things happening with the family. And this guy wasn't just incompetent. Like I could handle incompetency. There's a bunch of people that don't do their job, and I don't take it particularly personally, but this guy was completely apathetic. He just didn't give a crap. And
Yeah.
he had this habit, when people slurp their coffee out,
Yeah.
and I told him partway through, I said, "Look, that's really bothering me. Can you stop that?" He kept doing it. He didn't give a crap. And I'm just going, this is just not working. And then at the end, after I told him everything, it was very difficult for me to share the deepest parts of me with a stranger. He just kind of snorts his nose and goes, "Oh, you think it was a problem with your mum and dad?" And I tell you, in that moment, Donna, the whole room froze. And I knew exactly what was around me. I saw the glass framed psychology degree behind him. I'm like, perfect. I'm going to feed that thing to him. I'm about to murder this guy. Because he's in my state of disconnection, it made sense to remove this guy because he said he's a healer, but he's not just not healing people, he's harming people. So let's remove him. And I get out
Yeah.
of my chair to do this, and certain skill set. Not a man on the world could have stopped me from doing that. And I get out of my chair and I can't fully explain why this happened, but I'll just say what happened. I felt like a hand on my chest and words that I'd never heard before. Red flag, Tim. Red flag. And it pauses me for a second. And the words followed saying, "Tim, you're the toughest guy you know. And you're struggling in a system that doesn't seem to understand or doesn't seem to care. How many other people are struggling right now in the same situation you are?"
Yeah.
And I felt really lost in that moment. I sat back down, but here's where I saw them. I saw thousands of people to my left and right stuck in the same situation, looking in, saying, "Tim, if you can find a way forward for you, you can find a way forward for us." And I kind of looked off to the side. This guy just disappeared. And I said, look, it doesn't matter if it takes me a week or a decade. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but if it takes me a decade to move through this, that's the amount of time I'm going to be able to save all these people. And it was in that moment I realized the worst thing about pain, and it doesn't matter if it's physical, emotional, and it doesn't matter if you're a veteran or it's a relationship problem or it's cancer, the pain gets to a certain duration or intensity where it transforms without us even knowing into loneliness, isolation. I'm the only one going through this. And in that state of disconnect, all sorts of crazy things seem normal. And when I ask the question, how many other people are in the same situation as me, that broke my isolation. It's like the rocks fell away from around my heart and my brain started actually turning on. And that's when I started working with the non-for-profits. And without any training other than lived experience, I realized two things that aren't on the spreadsheet that had me achieving. My lifetime goal was to save 40 veteran lives from suicide. And these two things actually helped me achieve that within 12 months. And the first one, like we discussed, is breaking the isolation, because you can pour all the resources you want into somebody. If they're feeling alone and isolated, not knowing who to trust, it's largely water off a duck's back.
Yep.
And being in a state where you can't trust anybody, you can't drop your guard for a second, because if you drop your guard for a second, something bad's going to happen. It's going to be your fault. You're in this extreme state of fatigue. And my programs were designed to break the isolation. And that was one set of programs. And then the next one was getting them out of fatigue. And I just noticed, Donna, if we could break someone's isolation and get them out of fatigue, it's like this golden compass inside of them would turn on and they would know what to do. You know, people are naturally intelligent, but they're not thinking clearly. All their headspace is very much, arrested if you're fatigued and feeling isolated. But if you can break those two things, they just know what to do. And it's amazing how much I had achieved with just addressing those 2 points. And yeah.
Do you think that, because I have this theory and I'll ask your thoughts on this. Do you think that part of the reason this disconnect occurs is because the way we're trained, we stay disconnected from ourselves in the military. So what I mean is, like, I was really good, like, strategically. Oh, I could navigate. I walk in a room, I knew where to sit, where not to sit, who to talk to. I literally profiled people. I knew their background. I knew what kind of person they were. Could I trust them? Everything was like, could I work with the people to get what I needed done? I mean, we had a saying, like, when you went in the meeting, you knew what the outcome was before you went in the meeting. Like, so I was really good at that. Like, that was like,
Yeah.
because of the environment I was in, it's very toxic. And so it was my survival mode, right? But that's strategy. That's not, I mean, there's intuition, but it's outward, right? So it's all about survival. So we don't know what we need. We know what we have to do to survive. So what are your thoughts on that? Like,
Yeah, no, I feel you. And it's a self-feeding loop, because the more you see, the more you're aware of, the more you need to be on point. But consider that the more we're connected to something outside of ourselves, the more we disconnect from ourselves,
bingo, bingo.
and so, you know, it starts with, it's just been years since I really laughed. It's been years since I stopped and saw something so freaking beautiful. It just took my breath away.
And you
All
stopped
these
for
things.
it.
Yeah. Yeah. All these things we don't know that we're giving up to maintain this external focus, this loss of connection to self. And what a healer will essentially do is remove those blockages for you to connect back into this amazing thing that we have, that we've been gifted, that there is a time and a place to be externally focused, but no one's showing us the switch to plug back into the charger. When I'm talking to
Well, I think when you're
teenagers.
internally focused, when your intuition is good and you're trusting it and you're connected to it, it makes the external world very easy. It makes it very easy to go, oh, I don't need that. or that doesn't work. And there's no malice in it. There's no hate. It's like that doesn't resonate and doesn't align with me, you know? And you know, I hear people say like, oh, you're in alignment and all this hooey stuff. I'm like, well, hey, there's truth in this hooey stuff in the sense of when you are connected to yourself and you are trusting yourself, then anything external to you, it's just very easy to say, oh, that works, or that, and there's no rush. Like sometimes I don't do stuff and I'm like, oh, I should, you know, because I still have that ego part of me that's like, oh, you should be. But for some reason I'm not. And then I come to find out later, it was a good thing I wasn't, you know, like, yeah, I see you're nodding your head like, yep, yep, yep.
No, no,
Like,
no. Well, yeah, you've said a mouthful there, and trusting yourself and staying in that present state is quite a position of vulnerability, especially if we're so used to. My familiar world is scanning the room, making the plan, and getting the outcome. You know, it might not be the outcome that I felt led to do myself, but I'm on an agenda here, and I feel like I'm serving a higher good. So who am I to put myself in the way of that? And to go back into yourself, often I used to use external focus to stop myself looking down at my own pain and discomfort.
yeah. Well,
It's
and this is
scary to
where
look down, you know?
so the that's where the I think that's where I think the word, have you heard the word Teflon, right? Like,
Oh yeah, yeah, yep.
yeah, it doesn't stick to the Teflon, right?
Mm.
You stick it back to wherever, that external piece, right? And like I've had crazy stuff happen, like things fell apart, like probably about a month ago, something that we were working on completely unraveled and it was big, right? And I remember getting the phone call and I was at the gym and the person calling me was like, I need you to call me now. And I'm like, leave me alone. And then she's like, no, now. And I was like, oh, she goes, you need to keep lifting while I tell you this. Right. And so she's telling me
Oh
the
wow,
situation.
she
Yeah. And
knows
it
you.
was, it was not good. And I was like, hmm. And so, but I remember my reaction specifically. Was I not happy? Of course. I'd be a liar to say, like, oh no, I was at peace. Oh, of course I was unhappy. But I didn't react. Like I sat with it and I was like, hmm. And the person's like, you're not saying anything. I'm like, I'm processing. And they're like, oh my God. And they're like, that's almost more terrifying than you reacting. Anyways, long story short, I I got to the other side of that really quick in my book. Like 24, 48 hours later, I mean, hell, 12 hours later, I was already making the adjustments I needed to adjust. Like, oh, we need to stop this and do this and blah, 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 blah. Was I still not happy with it? Of course. But I will tell you, within 24, 48 hours, I remember saying to the other person, I'm like, you know what? Of course, I didn't want that to happen. Like, I didn't want that to fall apart, but I was relieved. The moment you told me, I felt a sense of relief. And I knew that even though my ego was like, don't worry about the relief. We're mad right now. Like, yeah, but I really did. I felt a sense of relief. And guess what? Nobody died. So we're all still moving forward. My ego took a little bit of a ding, you know, but we're still okay. Right. And that was really because I trust myself. I trust myself, right? I'm not trusting the outside world. I am trusting myself. So I know we're on limited time. And I always know when I get excited about these topics and I end up talking a lot. And I apologize for that because like these topics excite me. But what are you doing like with the breath works? Like what is it? So we talked all around this, like this connecting with yourself and all that. Explain to me, you develop breathworks in bed.
Well, I never thought I'd be a breathwork person, but you know when you find a tool that works and you didn't expect it to work as good as it does, I'm like, well,
Right.
let's just keep using that tool. And
Yeah.
I found it breathwork is the easiest, most natural and rapid way to bring you into the state you want to be in.
How'd you find it though? Like, how did
Well,
you end up
okay. Well, here's the
realizing it?
funny thing. You know, in the military, when they tell you to take a sight picture, you take a deep breath in, let it
Yep.
out, take up the first trigger pressure. All right. So I'm in the depths of fatigue in Afghanistan. We never got anything that you'd call sleep, but I had this theory that energy is like money. How you invest it is how you get it back. And I
Yeah.
only had like 5 cents worth of energy, and there was a part of me that says, Tim, you better invest that wisely. And I don't know why. I just felt led. I was literally in the dirt. You know, when they tell you just to lie down for 90 minutes, it's not sleep, it's just being horizontal.
Right.
And I pictured, instead of thinking, well, Tim, just try and rest as much as you can, I just focused on my left thumb and I took deep breaths into my left thumb. I pictured a pinprick at the top of my left thumb and I was breathing into my left thumb. And after about 3 breaths, in my mind's eye, my thumb turned white with light. And then I breathed into my pointer finger the same way. And I got to my index finger and then I drifted off. And then I woke up instead of with 5 cents worth of energy, 50 cents worth of energy. So then I'm like, oh, that's an interesting return. I don't know why that worked, but I'm not going to say no to that return. And so the next time I went to sleep, I spent 45 cents on breath work and I eventually pulled the light up to my armpit. Went to sleep, woke up with $5. And I eventually started massaging this energetic currency, reinvesting it through my body until I got to a point where I'm like, oh, actually, I'm pretty good. In fact, I can wake up and do a few push-ups and sit-ups and movements. And it's not like we weren't busy, but I had energy capital to reinvest in me. And it was at that point where once I was good for me, I could then see outside of myself. Because up until that point, you know, when everyone's fatigued, it's easy to turn on each other. And
Yeah.
when we're not fighting the enemy, we're fighting each other. I noticed there was a lot of internal conflict, and I just saw everyone else as a-holes. But when I got enough energy, I'm like, no, if I can give them what they need in their day, then my day's a whole lot better. And even if I'm being selfish, my survivability goes up. So I didn't know what it was. I just saw it put back in what was taken out, and it didn't cost me anything, and I could use it whenever I wanted. But it wasn't until I went through my divorce that I actually started seeing the unstoppable power of it. Because I was using this, in certain veteran recovery circles, but I didn't quite have the science of it or how to employ it properly.
Hmm.
But because breath work is so super powerful, Donna, it changes your whole state. Okay, your whole
Agreed.
state changes, and sometimes the old state won't let you change because it's hanging on and you've been in that state for so long, and it knows if you start this new habit, it will be kicked out. So it was me post divorce. I'd lost house, home, money, regular access to kids. uh, I was sleeping on the couch in my parents' place, and at 2 a.m. you could bet there was a whole lot of stuff going on in my head. And the irony was, even though I knew breath work would help, there was a thing that could help me. It's like I couldn't do it. And I realized my mind was like a garden. Whatever I water grows. And for years, for a period of time, I was watering the stress weeds, and they were taking over the garden. And what I found with the stress weeds, they don't just grow, they grow eyeballs and they become sentient, and they actually become aware of the things that you do that feed them and aware of the things that you do that starve them. So if you've ever noticed, like before you go to the gym, there's a part of you going, nah, let's do it later. Let's not do it now. That's the disempowered parts of you aware that they're about to be kicked out because you're about to be powerful. And so these stress weeds were loving it that I was stressed out, not sleeping, and it's like it paralyzed me. And then I was about to either take alcohol, drugs, do self-harm at 2 a.m. when everything was falling apart. And I looked at my left thumb and I said, Tim, you can take one breath. Take one fucking breath. And I drove it into my chest and went, and it was like the first breath I took from coming up from the bottom of the ocean. I'm like, this is working. This is working. Take two breaths. And I put two fingers into my chest. Okay, take three breaths. Four, get to five, get to 10. And then somewhere between breath 15 and 18, those freaking stress weeds got kicked out. And the rest of my brain was like, Tim, thank goodness you've kicked them out. Keep doing it. This is working. And so I noticed that breath work didn't just work. Because I'd been doing it my whole life, I needed some guidance to get me to do it. So I started making these silly little recordings with my own voice saying, breathe like this, breathe like that. And I would actually do it. And it actually worked. But it was just sort of that I needed that nudge to get going. And it consistently gave me deep quality sleep. But with a lot of physical injuries, like a lot of us have, getting out of bed in the morning was quite hard.
Hmm.
And so I thought, why not make breathwork tracks to alkalize the body? Because that's what it does, anti-inflammation with the breath, as
Mhm.
before you even get out of bed. So I had breathwork tracks to go to sleep with, turn your bed into a cloud. But then I had breathwork tracks in the morning to sort of turn your bed into a trampoline so you could meet the day with energy. And that was such a game changer. I started giving it to my friends and it just started consistently working. Then I thought, well, and I started running these workshops and I got this email from a Louis Colonel saying my men were coming up to me saying that was the first good night's sleep they had in up to 5 years. And I thought, well, how easy was that, after one session? But then he said, and it stopped me, what have you got when you're not there? I'm like, crap, I'm failing at some point here. I'm not, if I care about people, I've got to care about them the next day and the week later. I don't want to just be this show that comes to town and then disappears. So I withdrew from public life for about 2 years and I created this, you know, online resource, this app called the Breathwork in Bed app. And you just tell it when you want to sleep, when you want to wake up. Very simple, but it just falls out of your phone and it's easy and effortless just to tap it and it'll tell you to breathe, to fall asleep, bed like a cloud. And then in the morning you tap it again and life occurs very differently when you can win the first 5 minutes of the day before you've even left your bed. Um, and I thought, well, I can't do what other people do, but if I can help them sleep better, then they're going to be able to, bring their gifts into the world. And
Yeah.
that's what, I do what I do because it's so wonderful to see people flourishing. Um, you know, Sleep is the soil from which everything grows, and everyone's got these seeds of uniqueness, seeds of greatness that are kind of laying dormant if they're not sleeping properly. And once people bank that quality sleep, it's like compounding interest. All of a sudden, these unique flourishings come out of a person. You're like, wow, it's like seeing a color that never existed before. So yes, my work is helping people sleep better, but my joy is seeing what flourishes, when they're out of that sleep deprived state.
So it's funny because you made a comment and I kind of smirked because you're like, we're laying horizontal, we're not really sleeping. And I thought everybody was an asshole. And I'm like, my thought was like, and everybody thought everybody else was an asshole, right? Because
Yep.
nobody has sleep, right? When you can't sleep, you can't process well. Even though you guys are trained in sleep deprivation, it doesn't mean that the brain is still working optimally. It's just working to survive, right? And so yeah, I mean, we get that, but you can see where people that are sleep deprived, they miss information, they misunderstand information, they can't read body language, they can't read the context or don't understand the context of sentence, like, and we send you out there to go get them, boys, right? And so you when you said that, I did my first breath. Most people don't understand they're really not breathing very well during the day. I mean, obviously you're breathing because you're alive.
Yeah.
So I mean, don't come at me with that. But I mean like taking the breath in, holding it and bringing it out. It's amazing to find out that your shoulders were hunched. Just you saying it, I was
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm doing
Yeah.
it
Yeah. Yeah.
too, right? My shoulders were hunched. I'm taking breaths, but I'm not taking a full breath. And when you start doing that, everything you just said, it's so I giggle at this because typically, remember who you're hearing this from, right? This is a special forces guy. So this is like the least woo-woo personality type around, right? Like the you guys are the biggest skeptics is any woo-woo stuff, right? And the military in general is like, oh, we don't woo-woo. But there's science behind this.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of research in that. And this stuff works. And when you were talking about the stress weeds, and the other word, you made a quick comment and you said, I'd focus on these stress weeds and not other things. And where you put your energy is what will grow, right? And that stress weeds a really good analogy. Another term, manifestation, right? Manifesting can
Yeah.
be good, it can be bad. And yes, everybody thinks, oh, it's a woo-woo word. Yeah, call it whatever you will. Manifesting or having those positive thoughts is not toxic positivity for that slang term, right? It's not like putting your head in the sand saying everything's just fine. No, it's the day that I wanted to take the weight and wing it into the freaking glass. I was so mad that thing fell apart. And I'll acknowledge that. Trust me, I'm not happy. But because I've done a lot with meditation and breath and stuff like that, most of my brain was like, hey, and it's already analyzing it. How bad is
Yeah.
this? How bad is
Yeah.
this really? Did anybody die in this? They're not. Can you recover? I can. What hurts most about you? Your ego. Literally, that went through my head, right?
Yeah.
And then at the end of it, I was like, okay, well, now I'm annoyed because I got to do more work to refix it. It's different.
Now, Donna, I'm enjoying this so very much, and I need to be responsible. Literally in 2 minutes' time, I'm running a live Instagram breathwork
Okay.
session with a
So this
colleague.
is what we're
So
going to do.
can we do part two?
We
There's so much
can.
to this.
Yes. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to wrap this up. Give me your last thought real quick before we decide when we're going to do a part two.
My last thought would be, if you can control your breath, you can control everything.
Perfect. I think that's perfect. And we are going to wrap this up quick because Tim does have to go do a live webinar. And we are going to do a part two. And who knows? I might sweet talk him into a little series here on the side. We'll talk about it later, but we'll keep it short for now. So, from all of us here on Beyond the Frontline and our Parent Podcast, Coming Home Well, we wish you guys an awesome week. Please get out there and like and share this information because I'm telling you, it really does work, people. So thanks for spreading the word, and we'll catch you guys next time.
Thanks for listening to Beyond the Frontline, a podcast of Coming Home Well. Join us every other Wednesday. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. Thanks again. And until all are home and all are well.